Hi there. Today we've got Ashley Winning from the Motherhood Circle. And what we're going to do today is chat to Ashley about learning to be the mother you want to be, discussing choices around pregnancy, birthing and motherhood, and learning to find your voice and advocating for yourself with choices and confidence. And like I've just said to Ashley, this is something that's outside my sphere of expertise, so this will be really interesting because although it's the same audience, new mothers, expectant mothers, maybe already experienced mothers, but people that still struggle with maybe parts of motherhood, then this will be really interesting because Ashley definitely has some different skills to what I possess. So I'll hand you over to Ashley and she can tell you all about who she is and what she does.
Thanks so much, Heidi. It's such a pleasure to be here and I'm really excited, and it's so nice that you've opened the forum for me to come here and chat, even though we're on completely different, we're living totally different mindsets and, doing different things. I love that we're able to collaborate with each other and provide our audience with even more information and food for thought. And I love what you do. I recently had you interviewed on my motherhood video series, and you have so much wisdom to offer your audience and my audience, and so I'm so excited to be connected with you today.
All good. So we'll dive into the topic and just all about learning about the mother you want to be, because I find this really interesting because I had two very different children, same pregnancy, same birth, unfortunately, because they were both traumatic, but and two very, very different children. So I've mothered them very differently. But I'm always a bit baffled as to how children turn out to be so different. And I always wonder if it's the choices you make or something you do in pregnancy, or whether it's just nature versus nurture, who knows? So first of all, I suppose, I don't know how you want to start, Ashley, but whether it's discussing around pregnancy, birthing, or advocating for yourself, I'll give you the floor.
Sure. Lots of interesting food for thought there for us to talk about. And I always think about, nature versus nurture. And I think as a second time a mother of two myself, I often think the same because my children are so very different. I've got a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old now, 2 girls, and they could not be further from each other if possible. I've got a very sensitive, emotional firstborn, and my second is very strong and not as sensitive, I suppose. And I have been a different mother to both of my children, as I'm sure you've mentioned that you were to your children as well. But I think there's a huge amount of us that still comes over, and I feel like a lot of that has to do with nature. And, if you get into the birthing world and you talk to anyone who is really passionate about birth, you'll find that there's some different theories out there, as well as how the birth affects the baby as well, and how the birth affects the mother, and how the mother's brain changes, and how the baby's brain changes, and how we hold the trauma from, if we do experience birth trauma, as you mentioned in your birth, that does impact how we mother our babies. It does impact how we bond with our babies. It does impact whether we can breastfeed or whether we find difficulty breastfeeding with our babies, and also the feelings of how we are as a mother. So if you had a really traumatic birth and you're still recovering from that, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later, and you're dealing with sleep deprivation, you've had breastfeeding challenges, and you're still, having flashbacks or going past that birth trauma and trying to raise these children as well, it's very difficult, especially when we're doubting ourselves and we're not coming from a position of power. Whereas if we had maybe a very calm and gentle and confident birth, we might be feeling much more confident in motherhood and with our choices, and we might have a lot more energy to take on motherhood as well. But it's such a complex thing because we're all so different, and our personalities and our temperaments and our babies' personalities and the sort of support that we have at home as well is so varied. And so that's why I don't like to put anyone in a box or say, this is what's happened, this is what's going to happen. But what I say to people is to become the best mother that you can be, and the best version of yourself, or be the mother that you want to be, and this is the whole being the mother that you want to be, is to basically start living a life in alignment and finding out what your values are, figuring out what's important to you, because you might be comparing yourself to another mother who you find, I do this all the time. I see mothers on Instagram and they've got their beautiful babies and they're dressed up in these like matching outfits and their hair's beautiful. And then I look at my children and they're naked and their hair's like ratty, and I'm looking at them, I'm like, they've got food all over their face. And I'm looking on Instagram and I'm like, why do my kids never look like that? And then I have to remind myself, this is not normal. This is not like, this is Instagram. This is not like normal everyday like life. And we spend so much time comparing ourselves to other mothers. And that's, with me, with my children being 3 to 5. But, when I was a brand new mum, I used to compare myself to other mothers, and it would be, wow, she's got herself together. She looks so calm. She's got the beautiful pram and the beautiful bag, and she's not stressed. And if I went and had a conversation with that mother, she might say to me, oh my goodness, I had the worst birth. I'm traumatized. I didn't sleep last night. I can't feed my baby. I don't know how to breastfeed. And it's only when we start having conversations with other women and other mothers and each other that we truly understand what's going on with each other. So
people say that to me all the time. They said that to me all my life, as I seem so calm and so chilled. And I'm like, if you had any idea what was going on in my head, like the anxiety levels have always been really high in my family. But the same goes with my children though. If in any medical emergency with any other child, I'm cool as a cucumber. I can deal with anything. If they're not breathing, if they're anaphylaxed, like anything I can deal with. I'm the calmest person in the room. But when it's my children, I lose all sense. I can't, I'll rush into hospital over not a lot, because I don't know, it's just being a mother, isn't it? You can't regulate yourself.
Yeah, and Mother Nature's made sure that we're going to look after our babies and that we're really tuned into our children, and that they're the most important thing to us. And so even when they're a brand new baby, that desire to pick them up and hold them, that screaming that they have is such an urgent scream out to us. But getting back on topic, I suppose, I want to make sure that I'm going to be covering, the topic thoroughly. Learning to be the mother you want and discussing choices around pregnancy. So I believe being the best version of yourself and being the version that you want to be is completely in our control. And I believe that we can make small steps every day to become the person that we want to be. And I believe that the only way to really, live an aligned life is to know the choices available to us in pregnancy and birthing and those sort of things, so we can avoid or try to avoid or be educated around certain things that could cause us trauma, and understand, certain things that are going to benefit us and certain things that are perhaps not going to benefit us. But I believe that knowledge, comes with great power as well. And I think knowing some of the information, I think what happens is, I'll share a little bit about my story. When I was a brand new pregnant lady, I was really excited. I couldn't wait to get to the hospital. And I basically gave all my trust to the doctors, because we're taught our entire lives to trust doctors and medical professionals. And, I said, you're the boss, you tell me what to do. And so I did everything they told me to do. I said, I just want a vaginal birth. I don't want a cesarean. I knew that I was at higher risk, but I didn't know why. I kept asking birthing questions throughout my pregnancy, and they said, we'll talk about it next week. We'll talk about it next week. And so eventually I was in the public system, and eventually I got to, 38 weeks, and I was being induced because I was told I was being induced for gestational diabetes. And I didn't really ask any questions. I just trusted that they had my best interests at heart. And so I went along and had a failed induction, which I didn't even know was a possibility, because nobody had told me it was a possibility, which meant that I had what they call an emergency cesarean, which it wasn't an emergency cesarean. It was, but that's what they have to put it down as. So I had my baby via cesarean, and I spent the first, 12 months feeling like a failure of a mother. I really wanted to give birth to my baby vaginally, and I felt like a failure, and I felt like I didn't give birth. And I would see these memes circulating on Facebook. I haven't seen them for a very long time, I think because I deleted all the pages. But you know, people saying that cesarean isn't a real birth, and, you know, everyone has an opinion on everything, right? Which was just feeding into my already, you know, my angst about the birth and the thing that I didn't want to happen and other people's opinions and things. And so then I had difficulty breastfeeding, and I wasn't getting the right support and information from the midwife who was coming to my home. And she was suggesting that we go out and get formula. Well, actually, it wasn't a suggestion. She told my husband, get in the car and go get formula. And my milk hadn't even come in, and I had no breastfeeding information or knowledge. And so again, I was in a place of trust, but also desperation, because I had no knowledge. And I thought, well, she should know what she's doing. Okay, fine. I don't want to formula feed, but okay, we'll do this. And then my breastfeeding was shot from there on, because I didn't have the confidence, I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't know what I was doing, but I really wanted to breastfeed, but I didn't know what I was doing. So, and I find that this happens often so much, and so many women are triggered by their breastfeeding journey. You see it all the time, you know, I couldn't breastfeed, don't say that, I can't breastfeed, I had troubles, I saw someone. And then you find out, you speak to them more, and you find out that they actually put their trust in somebody like me, who they thought was educated, that they had spent a lot of time educated. And so I found in my travels that you really needed to speak with a qualified lactation consultant. It's called a IBCLC or something, like international board registered lactation consultant or something like that. Someone who's actually got a degree, and someone who basically lives and breathes breastfeeding, bottle feeding, all of that. And so the more I speak to women, I, you know, get on calls with women years later, and they tell me their breastfeeding story, and they start crying, and that trauma is still there. And they said, I wish I'd known you when I was in that situation. And we get down to it, and the person they were talking to came across as an expert and came across as a, you know, breastfeeding consultant, but wasn't really a breastfeeding consultant. They probably had a little bit of breastfeeding information. And so, you know, the women are taking, unfortunately, incorrect information and advice. And then, I mean, I found this out after, when I was determined with my second baby to do things the way that I wanted to do. I was going to have a vaginal birth, and I was going to breastfeed, and I was not going to feel like a failure. I was going to do everything I wanted to do. And so I educated myself, and I did the Australian Breastfeeding Association class, and I was the only second-time parent in the room, and everyone else was first-time parents. And I was like, tick, 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 this is where I made all my mistakes. And I was actually able to sit in that room and say, this is some really good stuff, because I can tell you they're telling the truth when they say, if you don't do these things, your milk supply will go low, because I know from first-hand experience. Yeah. And it was just a real eye-opener. It cost me $50, I think. And I literally became a breastfeeding guru. Like, I was able to then breastfeed my second baby to 12 months. I mean, it didn't come without struggle or difficulty, but I knew who to turn to, and I knew I could give the ABA a call if I was doubting myself. And the mindset and the mind games that go on during that journey as well. I did go to a GP for some assistance and got laughed at and told that, you know, what I was suggesting was a bit of a joke. And, you know, I learned along the way that, you know, certain people in certain positions are not qualified to give an opinion or advice. And the same thing with friends and family. You know, when we're pregnant, you know, everyone's got an opinion. I remember when I was before I was pregnant, I had my boss. She had 4 children. She said to me, go private, have an epidural as soon as you get in there. It's the best thing. You don't get a medal if you don't have, you know, if you don't have one. There's no award, so just do it. And I was like, that's all right for you. Like, you know, it's all right for you to say that and for you to have that opinion. But everyone has their own desires and wants, and, you know, and it was so funny how people push their opinions on you and tell you this is the only way. And it's just not true. I don't believe there's like one way for everyone. I believe that, you know, when you talk to somebody and you actually have a conversation with them, and you talk to them about their fears, you talk to them about their, you know, their experiences, and you find out their reasons for wanting to do things, and you can explore those reasons and find out is this the best option for you? Let's talk about some of the pros and cons of this option. If we're talking about birthing, for example, let's talk about some of the things that could happen. Let's talk about the support that you're after. Let's talk about the birth that you want. And then let's find you the best space for you to be where you feel safe. And you can't say that, you know, statistically, if you want a vaginal birth, you're more likely to get a vaginal birth in a public hospital or in a home birth or with a private midwife. That's the statistics. But it does not mean that if you go with a private obstetrician in a private hospital that you will not get your vaginal birth. And it doesn't mean that you won't come out feeling happy and confident. I know many women who have had private obstetricians in a private hospital and had their private birth, and they've had their vaginal birth against the odds with interventions and things like that. And they felt amazing and they felt positive. And for them, it was a much better alternative than going to a public hospital where they had gone to a public hospital before and felt like just another number kind of thing. So there's so many different things for us to consider in our choices. Based on personality, temperament, financial situation, you know, our stories that we're telling ourselves, you know, what's happening with our baby, what's happening with our body. I think that's, you know, pretty much, you know, all in life. There's so many choices that we have available to us.
Especially now. It is terrifying though how see this I'm sorry, I have my children at home and he's already shouting at me. It is terrifying how the statistics. I'll sorry, just a second. Come here. Come here. It's terrifying, especially when you look at the American things. Right, off you go, off you go. Sorry, just a sec. Yes, sorry for the interruption. What I was going to say was, it's really scary about, I'm sure a lot of people have seen the American statistics, and I just feel like the Western, or Australia and the UK, kind of go in the similar way with all the private birthing and what seems to be the norm to go cesarean, which is any choice. Don't get me wrong, I'm pro whatever anyone chooses to do, because actually for me, I had 2 traumatic births. Preeclampsia both times. I actually went blind with my first child with preeclampsia. And they were basically forced out with induction. And if I had a third, I said it would have to be a cesarean. I cannot go through that again. And when I went to see an obstetrician, I went public the first 2 times. But when I went the third time to see an obstetrician who actually birthed my first son, just because he happened to be on call in the public system, he was just wonderful, and I would highly recommend him. But he said that the first thing I would need to do is get trauma counselling from the births, which, coming from a private doctor, I don't know, I was kind of, I suppose because I'm a public nurse, I'm like, go public, you know, public is rocks and etc. But I think when you've got doctors like that telling you to go and get counselling before you enter into a third pregnancy is actually really, really good. But yeah, the statistics are just crazy, and it does seem like they're rising. I don't know if I'm wrong, but it seems like those sort of stats are rising about people choosing one thing because they think it's better to just not go through any pain. Or
no, 100%. You know, your doctor who recommended birth trauma counselling or trauma counselling is amazing, because so many doctors don't recognise trauma. And, you know, they always say, a lot of people, and from my experience, is just be thankful that you've had a healthy baby. It could have gone way worse. Or this is what women who have had trauma hear all the time. So 1 in 3 women in Australia have childbirth trauma. And a lot of the time it's not actually from the actual childbirth itself. I mean, quite often it is, but a lot of the time it's because the woman isn't feeling heard, supported. They're not, you know, feeling like they are in a safe space. And so it's that trauma that they're carrying over, as well as the physical trauma of the actual birth, which can be very, you know, traumatizing as well. So we just think of birth trauma as like, you know, you have to have this crazy birth story to actually have the trauma. But even speaking to some women, in my experience, who have had a seemingly perfect birth from the outside, those women in their skin and their experience, they also are experiencing trauma as well. And they don't even know that it's trauma. And so even with my clients, I've been talking to some of them and I know that they're experiencing trauma, but I'm not telling them, hey, you're experiencing trauma, because it's not my space to be doing that. They need to feel into that themselves. And, you know, their parents are saying to them, you know, you've got to get on with it. You've got another child. You've got to really move forward with this. You just be thankful that you've got a healthy baby. And then they go see a specialist and the specialist is saying similar things. And it's really upsetting and negligent, I think, that women aren't getting that recognition and that support. Because how amazing would it be if, you know, we were sent on to get counselling and it was recognised instead of, you know, swept under the rug. And because we're the ones who have to look after our children. So if we're traumatized raising our children, we're not coming from a position of power. We're not making choices based on what we feel is the best for us. We're making a choice based on, sometimes out of fear. You know, I don't want to have that birth again because this is going to happen, or this is a dangerous situation for us as well. So yeah, I highly recommend birth trauma, counselling for anyone who is feeling that way. And yes, the caesarean rates are rising in the Western countries, probably more so because some women are opting for it. Some women are opting for it after a caesarean with their first. Maybe they had a breach with their first, or quite often failed inductions lead to another caesarean. And doctors are giving incorrect information, or women are, giving incorrect information to their friends. The huge fight that I had to go through to even be allowed to VBAC, and I say that because it's my choice, to feel like I was allowed to VBAC or allowed to have a vaginal birth, a baby come out of my vagina, which is what I was born to do, which is what we're all born to do, is crazy, for us, for anyone who's wanting a natural vaginal birth, in any hospital setting at the moment, can be really hard for a woman to achieve with some of the interventions and things. And that's why I say it's really important to find a care provider who knows you, supports you, and go to a place where you're feeling safe. And so, I have a program. It's a 6-week program, and I talk about those choices. I talk about the birthing spaces and the choices, and we go through all the options throughout, pregnancy right through to postpartum, so that women have all of that information available to them. Because I think it's important, and I think this should be done on the first time that hey, you're pregnant. Awesome. We're going to set you up with somebody now, and she's going to talk to you about all of your choices available, and you're going to discover what path you want to go on to. But what happens is, hey, you're pregnant, you're going to this hospital, and that's it. Okay, I'll lock you in and you're going, and that's it. And you don't even know your choices unless you've got a friend who had something different to you. And, God help if anyone says they're having a home birth, because that's just like too crazy. But when you look into these things, you find, once you start looking into things and educating yourself, you might find that something pops up for you that you think, oh, that's a different option. Maybe that's a good option for me. And maybe that's, something I should be looking into. And I think that's where the knowledge and power comes from. But I, recommend meditating and, doing a daily practice and really feeling into what it is that you want for your motherhood journey and for your birth and for your pregnancy afterwards. And as I mentioned, breastfeeding is a huge thing after we have our babies. One of the obstacles that we face, that so many women want to breastfeed, and they're just not set up to successfully breastfeed or meet their own personal goals as well. So I want everyone to kind of, understand there are courses out there and that there is a lot of information out there for people so that they can actually, meet their own personal goals and that. And when it comes to being the mother that you want to be, there's so many people that have opinions on what you should name your child, how you should sleep with your child, how you should feed your child, telling you your belly's so big, your belly's so small. Are you sure you should have a vaginal birth? Maybe you should have a cesarean birth. Everyone's got an opinion because everyone's had a different experience. And some people are traumatized and they're still traumatized 20, 30, 40 years later. And they've had an experience and they're talking to you about, telling you what they think you should do. And really it's about you finding your journey and what you want to do, and then spending some time to feel what it is you need to actually make that happen. Is it that you need to find the evidence to support you? Some people need to have the evidence, and other people just need intuition, and they just need to feel into themselves and feel, no, this is what I want to do. I feel like it's intuitively right for me, and this is what I'm going to do. And so taking that time and that process, and also having someone to kind of guide you through that process as well, like a birth educator or having a doula or someone like that. I am a motherhood guide, so I do the one-on-one coaching as well as my programs. But I believe it's all that mindset and just reminding yourself of what it is that you want to do and who you want to be. And what do you think with your experience, Heidi?
Do you know what stood out for me with both my experiences is that what I found a big gap is that first 12 weeks where you find out you're pregnant. So I found out I was pregnant probably like 4 weeks. And then it was like, but no one wants to know until you're 12 weeks and you have like a scan or something. And I'm like, that was 2 months of me just wanting to shout it from the rooftops and find out as much information as I could. And I think that, I don't know if it was just me, but that gap was, if you can fill it with like advice, like what you provide at the Motherhood Circle, if you, rather than just, Googling things, and, if someone like you can go in there early and sort of give people, just a confidence around the choices and all that's definitely a period of time that stands out to me, because I was like, no one wants to know. Like, no, I can't have a scan. I went to have a blood test and that was it. But it's like, you're just growing, you're starting to grow the baby. And once you hit 12 weeks, I feel like it kicks off with, midwife appointments and scans and all that kind of thing. But those first 12 weeks, I think, from a mother point of view, especially with a first baby, you are so hungry for information and learning what your choices are, because you don't know until you go to that first appointment.
Exactly. And when you go to the first appointment, it's too late because you've already been booked in. And who's told?
Oops, I've lost you. Okay.
I had exactly the same experience with you in that first, I found out when I was 4 weeks as well. And then, there's like, you can get a blood test and, they give you numbers, but then if you want to find out again, you've got to go get another blood test. And I see it all the time in the trying to conceive sections, or women who are, newly pregnant. And it's so obsessive as well, like having to go to the doctor and then them doctor saying, oh, it's not looking good. And then you've got to wait, oh my God, 2 days. I've got to wait 2 days. And so my course, the 6-week bump to baby program, is designed for women who are trying to conceive or women in that first trimester, because, when you do go to the midwife, it's too late, because by that point, you're just clinging on to anyone who's going to give you any knowledge. And so you're like, please help me. I don't know what the hell's happening here. I've got no information. I'm relying on you to give me the information. And so they're only going to give you the information that their hospital or policy or whatever it is that they're trained to do, plus their personality. Are they a go-getter, go above and beyond to help their clients, or are they just coming to work and they're like doing the bare minimum? When you go with a private midwife, you can actually handpick who you're going to see, and you get a vibe, and you're going to see that person all the time, and you can be like, oh, no, I don't really like this person, I'm going to go with this person because we've got a better vibe. But when you go to the public hospital, you just get whoever midwife is working on that day and however she's feeling, and whatever's happened, if she got in trouble that day, there's so many things to consider. But in that first trimester, I remember with my first baby, we were the first ones in our family. We're still the first ones. We're the oldest in our families. And so we had our baby first, and I called my mom, and I remember she was like, oh my God, I'm so excited, crying. And then she said to me, well, just pretend that you're not pregnant, because you could lose the baby. And you don't get your hopes up. I know. And I was just like, oh my God, because as if I wasn't worried enough.
Yeah.
And I then had her say that to me, and I was like, okay, so now I'm just going to pretend that I'm not pregnant, because I could get hurt, and me pretending is going to take away that disappointment and pain, right?
Mm.
And then my husband called his brother, and his brother said exactly the same thing. He's
Oh my
like,
God.
oh, I know someone who lost a baby, so don't get your hopes up. And
Oh.
I was really devastated, and I was really worried the whole time, because I had a woman at work who had had 4 miscarriages. My mother-in-law had had like 7 miscarriages before she conceived my husband, and I was already freaking out about it. So I spent my entire first trimester freaking out.
Oh
So
God.
I had HG, so I was sick, and if I had a minute or a day or a moment where I wasn't sick, oh my God, the baby's dead. The
Oh.
baby's dead. I'm crying. It was a nightmare. And
Mm.
so if I could have spent, I mean, you don't really have that much energy during that time, which is why while you're trying to conceive is probably the best time. But, with the little energy that you do have, spending it on something positive and actually something that's going to move you forward, and knowing what's going to happen, rather than getting to that 12 or 15 weeks and then you've already had that first scan, being able to advocate and make those choices and say, do I even want this scan? I already know it's going to be this much money. Is it something that I want? Is this, even worth my time? What's going to happen? And then being able to advocate for yourself. And instead of people leading the path for you and telling you what's going to happen, you can actually already know, what is this scan for? Do I need it? Why are they doing it? What's the evidence on scanning? Ultrasounds, in Germany, they've just stopped the fun ultrasounds, the 3D, 4D fun
Yeah.
ultrasounds we have. Well, they found it so dangerous that they now made it illegal. And
Really?
they've made it totally illegal over there.
Wow.
Because ultrasound doesn't come without risk.
Yeah.
But nobody says, hey, welcome to your ultrasound. I just want to let you know this is the risk of the ultrasound.
I didn't know that. I
Never.
must have had about 8 ultrasounds with Mason.
I had a million of them.
Mm.
And so, when we go on to have another baby, my choices will probably be a bit different. Even though I've got healthy, happy children, knowing what I know now, it does, make you, as we
Mm.
grow and we learn, we make different choices. And so,
Mm.
that's a big thing for me, that Germany, has made those illegal. And I went on and did all those fun ultrasounds with my children. And, so, and then the guilt kicks in when you find out little things like that, and
Mm.
you've got to, forgive yourself and move on for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But knowing these things, a lot of the women, that I am in connection with and, come through my course, obviously they want to be empowered and they want to know. They're so educated and they're like so strong. And the one thing I really want to say is that we're not here to prove a point to anyone. We're not here to please anyone. We're not here to debate our choices with anyone. We're here to just do whatever we want to do, to live the journey we want to with the least resistance. And so I spent my second pregnancy fighting and advocating and arguing with the hospital staff, the doctors and that, about this feedback,
Mm.
which turned out to be, it's a huge, because of my BMI, it was a BMI issue apparently, but I just didn't want to be induced like
Mm.
you. I had a cesarean because I was induced. So of course I didn't want to follow the same path, because
Yeah.
there was a pretty high chance that was going to happen again, logically. And so me advocating for myself and getting down to it, it was a hospital staffing issue, that they weren't comfortable without basically being in control of my birth. But being in control of my birth by being medically inducing and that sort of thing was going to significantly reduce my risk, my chances of having a vaginal birth. So I found myself kicked out of hospital at 37 weeks, because nothing had changed, my health and my baby, and nothing had changed. It was purely because they weren't able to fearmonger me into a cesarean or a induction, or whatever it is that they wanted to do. And so they waited until I was the most vulnerable, the most tired, even though we'd had this discussion at 20, 25 weeks, and I'd said, look, if it's a staffing issue, send me to a decent hospital. I'll go to the one in the city. where they've got staff on 24/7, a tertiary hospital, go send me to a big tertiary hospital, you know. But they waited to 37 weeks and then called me up and said, look, you know, we're not willing to risk our license on you. So, yeah, we're going to kick you out and send you to a different hospital. Pardon?
You could have gone into labour at any day at that point.
Yeah, I know. And so apparently that's illegal. They're not allowed to do that, but they do. There's ways around it, obviously. But I've spoken to like a maternity consumer person. The hospital's gone through a huge big, people were sacked and they've gone through and got new people in and they're doing a new beautiful birthing suite. But, you know, women were driving in different directions to get to different hospitals to go past this hospital because it was so bad.
Oh my God.
Unfortunately.
And it is such a vulnerable time as well, isn't it? It really
and
is.
So if I'd had the knowledge that I'd had, yeah, it is a very vulnerable time. If I'd had the knowledge I'd had, obviously I didn't have the knowledge until I went through this experience, I could have advocated to go and see a private midwife. You know, it would have been worth the money for me to go with a private midwife, choose the hospital, not have to fight, not have to argue, not have to deal with that sort of conversation, and then have probably, you know, the birth that I ended up wanting to have, and feeling more confident and calm and relaxed and that sort of thing, rather than ending in a hospital, you know, 3 weeks before my baby was born and not knowing anyone and having to go through all these things. And so I knew intuitively that this was not a great situation because I was crying on the way to hospital. I had anxiety, you know, I was like, didn't want to go see the doctors, and it was not a wonderful experience. And so I want other women to have, you know, a powerful experience. I want them to be in control of their choices. I want them to know what they can do, and what's possible, and know all their options available. And then they can make the choices to become the person and the mother that they want to be, and go into that motherhood journey with experience and confidence. Because if you're able to navigate your pregnancy, then you're able to do the same when your baby's born, because it doesn't stop there. You know, when you go to get breastfeeding support or you know, this sort of support or whatever it is for your baby, you still have to overcome, is this person giving me the right information? Do I need to see something? You still kind of need to know all that stuff. So it doesn't end. So it's like a chain, you know, following you through the whole process, and it doesn't stop. You and I know now, you know, if something happened with our children, you know, we've then got to put our trust into someone, and we, you know, we've still got to gauge whether this is right or wrong, or do we get a second opinion? And when they go to school, we've still got to step into those shoes again. So it's a never ending cycle. I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. So just to wrap up a little bit, so if you tell people where they can find you, and we'll obviously attach some links here as well for, you know, if you have any resources that might be useful for people, also about your course, and where maybe on your socials or your website. If you just tell people where they can find you, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so jump on my website, www.themotherhoodcircle.com.au. I will also link you a postpartum plan. So if you are pregnant, you can start to plan for, you know, the postpartum with your baby. And I'll also provide Heidi with some links for the programs if you're interested in them. But if you go to my website, there's heaps of, I'm sure you'll find it there as well. There's also a motherhood video series where I interviewed Heidi, and I will be releasing that interview soon as well. So it's a free series where I interview experts and specialists so they can share their wisdom. So, you know, if you're looking at, am I going to have an induction? I've got an induction one there. You know, if you're looking at allergies, I've got Heidi coming on talking about allergies and that sort of thing as well. So that's a free resource. But I am so grateful and blessed. I hope that this information, you know, helps you on your journey. And I'm really thankful for you having me on, Heidi.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for today. I'm looking forward to my audience seeing everything you have to offer. And I think it's great coming from someone who's actually been through these experiences. I think it's really hard to be given advice unless you've actually lived these experiences. And with hindsight, we can always help other people. So thank you so much, Ashley. Take care.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.